Hello everyone and welcome back to the Lowland Greenhouse here at Carlton Carnivores. I've got another plant spotlight for you guys today, and we're moving back to a genus that I have not visited in quite some time. Haven't actually done coverage on very many species at all in this genus because sometimes they can be a little bit difficult or very seasonal sometimes to get to flower, and well, they only look best when they are actually in bloom. But this one is a pretty easy species to grow and also a pretty impressive plant once it gets going fully. And this is part of the Foliosa subgenus of Utricularia, the bladderworts. Foliosa is a group of bladderworts that is primarily terrestrial, sometimes slightly epiphytic. So they will grow on the ground or up into trees and such, and they tend to produce, hence the name foliose, relatively large leaves. And this one probably has some of the largest leaves in the genus, and that is Utricularia longifolia. Now, of course, longifolia translates as long leaf, and it quite fits this species pretty well. Mine is actually currently rather small for what this species can be, and it also is rather impressive for the flowers that it produces. I'll show that in a little bit here. This is a species that is native to the eastern coast of Brazil primarily, so in the coastal Atlantic rainforests up into kind of seasonal dry forests and grasslands in the higher elevations. So this species grows as a terrestrial plant primarily, sometimes lithophytically, which means it grows on relatively bare rocks as well. So very loose, open soils, either very sandy or in peat and sphagnum type swamps and wetland areas. And it grows as these clumps of very big leaves. Now, fun thing I always like to say, remind, is with bladderworts, these that we call leaves are not actually leaves. These are actually modified stolons or stems. Their actual leaves are the bladders that are produced underground on the non-photosynthetic stems that these guys produce. They are technically an entirely rootless plant. They don't produce roots, they just produce all sorts of different variations of stems, and then the bladders, which are the original leaves that have become extremely modified. So these leaves, as you can see, this one's actually a pretty good example here, can get quite large. In some cases, longifolia has been recorded to produce leaves that are more than 3 feet in length, more than 1 meter in length. Now, most of the time, they don't get that big. As you can see, like on this guy, this is a pretty average plant that you might see in cultivation. The leaves will usually range from about 4 to 8 inches long, maybe a bit over a foot. And then very occasionally you will get some of these larger leaves that will go up to 18, 24 inches long, and maybe in some rare cases those 3-foot leaves. They're kind of oblong, oblanceolate, so very narrow at the very bottom where they connect to the rest of the stems, and then they get broad kind of into the middle, and then narrow slightly towards this little tip here. And that's the average shape of those guys. The bladders, which of course are underground with these guys, are on the ends of, like, you can see all these extra stems and stuff, the stolons that are growing off here. Those will spread out across the soil. They'll also go down into the loose soil, and the bladders are formed underground. They're usually only like maybe a 1/16 to an eighth of an inch across, so very small. But of course, if you are familiar with the bladderworts, you might know these are the fastest moving plants on Earth. So those bladders have a negative pressure that is put into them by glands that pump water out of them. And they sit in the soil waiting for something to brush by the trigger hairs that are sitting around the opening, the mouth of that trap. And once those trigger hairs are touched, they trigger either mechanically or by electrical stimulation that door, the mouth, to swing inward. And the negative pressure inside then sucks the liquid that's right there, or air, and whatever small organism triggered that into the trap and snaps shut. That can happen with anywhere from 1/50th to 1/2000th of a second. Now, it only takes 1/3 of a second to blink. So it is extremely fast. It is faster than the eye can actually register, and faster than a lot of cameras can even register too. But now, of course, they only capture very small organisms, usually nothing more large than like a springtail or such. And of course, a lot of the things they will eat are aquatic organisms, so amoeboids, ciliates, and other things crawling around in there. The biggest species may actually capture mosquito larvae or tiny fish, but most of them are usually feeding on much smaller things. Now, where this plant grows is a tropical area, so it experiences pretty warm and moist conditions throughout the year. However, it is slightly south of the true equator, the true tropics, so many of the areas that it grows in are what are considered tropical dry forests. So they do actually experience some seasons, and that's very important for what this plant looks best producing, and that is its big, gorgeous flowers. Now that is sitting on the ground here, and this stalk is a good 2 feet up above the surface of the pot there. So they produce quite large stalks when they actually start to bloom, and the flowers, as you can see, they aren't small either. This is almost 2 inches across. But these guys, during the winter or dry season there, they do experience a very slight decrease in photoperiod, maybe by an hour or two, and then their environment usually dries out a lot. It goes from very moist, rainy, monsoonal to sometimes almost bone dry in some cases, and these guys will often be concentrated in the wetter areas of their environments because they do not like to dry out completely, but they will tolerate the soil to drying to just barely damp. And after that happens, once the rains start to move in again, that's when they start sending up their flowers. So they've survived the dry season, the wet's coming back in, conditions are just about right, so they send up these blooms to attract pollinators. Those pollinators, I'm not entirely sure what they are, but considering the length of the spur that's on these things, it's probably possibly hawk moths or even hummingbirds might visit these guys, certain species of long-tongued bees maybe, but it will get up large and they will produce several buds on that stalk, sometimes up to a dozen or more, and they will open sequentially on up. Now, they are very broad. They have kind of this double-lobed lower lip on the flower, and expanded, almost balloon-like palate within the center, and then a very small, kind of cap-shaped upper lip out in front of the calyx here. And then, of course, underneath, that long, thin, tapered spur. This species usually has flowers that are this rich lavender violet coloration with that bright yellow stripe down the center of the palette as well. They are structured much like their relatives, the butterworts, in which inside that flower they have a little flap-like stigma, and then up underneath that are 2 stamens with the pollen on the ends, in the anthers. So when insects or whatever other pollinator comes in to get the nectar in that nectar spur, they'll brush against that stigma, and whatever pollen might be sitting on them goes against that stigma, and as they back out, they will pick up the pollen and then move on, hopefully, to the next flower. And so then this species gets pollinated. In cultivation, if you only have one clone, which most people will, they do self-pollinate, but they have to be manually self. So you just go in there, you kind of fold open that lip, and you'll expose the reproductive parts right in the at the top of that tube there, right underneath the top lip. And you just take like a toothpick or something, grab that pollen, and brush it against the stigma. If you succeed, then this flower will fall off in a couple of days, and you'll get this big chunky pod that forms that will then produce many hundreds of tiny brown seeds. Those seeds in the wild, of course, are then dispersed by wind and water and hopefully land in a nice, relatively open, moist location where they will sprout and form a brand new colony. Now, in cultivation, again, this is a pretty easy species to grow, and it's not really picky. A lot of people might grow it like I do in a very sphagnous mix. I kind of just have a loose mix of sphagnum and maybe a bit of perlite in there. It'll tolerate pure sphagnum. It'll probably grow in a peat mix as well. As long as it is very moist and low nutrient, it'll probably be happy. And then give it moderately bright light. They will tolerate part shade all the way up to almost full sunlight levels. The brighter the light, probably the stronger these guys will grow. And then every now and then, maybe you'll give it a spritz of liquid fertilizer, or if it's just a nice healthy pot with good sphagnum and stuff, and you don't have to treat it with anything, there's probably all sorts of little soil organisms in there that this plant will feed on and be happy. And for the most part, that's it. You'll get these big leaves. It'll have the stolons that'll go spreading out, trying to find new places. If you have this in a nice wide tray, it'll just eventually cover and fill that tray with stolons and leaves and such. Now, if you want this species to flower, it does take a little more because, again, it's a seasonal plant. So come winter, you can do one of two things, or preferably even both. You can reduce the photo period by a few hours. So if you're growing it on a windowsill, the natural conditions will do that for you. As the days get shorter, that photo period shrinks. This plant will experience less light per day. And then as the days get longer, that reverses and the plant will decide, oh, hey, it's time to flower. You can also reduce the amount of water it's getting. Most of the year, keep it, again, very moist, very wet. During winter, maybe just let it dry to just barely moist. So that it's a little damp to the touch, but no more than that. And just leave it at that for a couple of months, and then start watering it more heavily again. And that will usually trigger a bloom. And sometimes multiple blooms, because this guy's got the one stalk here that's growing, but then he's got a second one that's forming right here as well. So I will get this stalk, but then there's another one that's coming up right behind it. A nice happy plant may produce 4 or 5 stalks within a small space. If you have a nice big tray, you might get dozens of stalks that are produced all at the same time and have dozens of those flowers open all at the same time as well. And then, of course, for propagating, those seeds work, but also easily enough. You can take a leaf, you can take a stolon, you can take a whole plug out of this and throw it on new soil and wait, and it will do the rest. These guys, again, are very, very easy to grow, and with just a little of that extra work, very easy to bloom as well. But that is about all that I have for that species at the moment. There's not a whole lot of other Foliosa species that are very easily grown in cultivation, certainly not flowered very easily. I've had tricolor for a while, but I've never been able to convince it to bloom, and I've honestly never heard anyone else been able to do so in cultivation either. Although certainly if you know somebody, let me know, because there are pictures of flowers from the wild, but it's very uncommon in cultivation. But if you have any questions on this species, certainly leave them in the video comments below. If you enjoy educational videos such as this, make sure to like this video, share it, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss anything coming up, because there will be plenty more photos or videos of this, other species that I work with. The wildlife adventures will hopefully be starting up in a few weeks again soon. If you'd like to see more, I'm always posting photos, videos, tidbits, and such on social media, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook at Carlton Carnivores, or there's my website, carltoncarnivores.com, where you can find the database and the blog with more information on the plants and animals that I work with. There you can also find the shop, so if you'd like to support in a more financial manner, you can buy the live plants, the seeds that I have for sale, merchandise. Contact me, perhaps, if you're looking for a pet and you're interested in a baby snake, because I often have those available, the sand boas right now. Or if you'd like to help support in another manner, we do have a Patreon that you can join, patreon.com/hcarlton. Members there get special benefits like early access to the videos, first notices on new items that are coming into the shop, as well as the monthly seed contest that I do. So seeds that I may not have in the shop at all that I will offer to members there only. And one winner each month gets something cool. Or you can also donate at Ko-fi or simply contact me for other methods. Most of the links for these things will be in the video description below, but until next time, I'm Hawken Carlton, and this is Carlton Carnivores.